back to Mel on the Street. Today, I have Michael Gayad back with me again, the publisher of the Lead Lag Report, macro voice of reason or chaos, depending on the market, and one of the few people who called the big pullback before the S&P 500 dropped 20% between February and April. Thank you so much for joining me today.
I was also on a cruise saying you'd see the biggest intraday turnaround in history when the Dow was down like 1,500 points. And we had that huge move on that Wednesday, which was the low. But yeah, I'm not keeping tab of that.
No, but I am, because I remember reading a lot of your posts on X while you were on that cruise ship,
That
and
was
the
a fun day.
push-ups. Yeah, the push-ups. It was great. It was great to watch. So today I kind of want to one of the things I want to get into is ask you, is the worst behind us? Whether gold is sort of, in your own words, in my words of what you said, totally wrecked, and what yesterday's new US-UK trade deal tells us about where things are headed for the US and for the market.
All right. So a few things to unpack. I've been pretty public in my belief that we'll still see lower lows. And that what we saw off of that panic low on Wednesday, when I got stupidly bullish and very, very dramatic on X, as I tend to because the algorithm likes it. I think they in quotes, the policymakers, Trump, basically just delayed what could have been a very serious week of margin calls by lifting collateral values up, pausing the tariffs, and causing that rip back. I still think lower lows are likely because it doesn't make sense to me that credit spreads came right back, that junk debt totally V'd as if there's no slowdown coming, while small caps are still nowhere near as healthy as they should be if the tariff tantrum is indeed over. And if the tariff tantrum is over, then somebody has to explain to me, why is it that 10-year yields haven't dropped? So in the initial phases of that decline, treasuries were acting like the risk-off asset again, which benefited my own strategies and funds. That flight to safety took place. And then the latter part of that decline, yields rose because suddenly everyone realized, well, wait a minute, these tariffs are inflationary. Well, if we're going to now have this supposed string of deals coming and tariffs can be removed, then those yields should go back and drop. And that's not happening. They're actually quite sticky at these levels. So that alone tells me that we're probably not done with this. Having said that, I could be obviously completely wrong. I've been wrong plenty of times before. You mentioned the yen carry trade. I kept on saying throughout this decline, I don't believe this is because of tariffs. I said this is because of Japan. And I said that because it's not a coincidence that the yen started rallying really in January and kept on strengthening, which was what you saw in the lead up to the reverse carry trade in August of last year. And then you saw these headlines about Japan dumping treasuries. So it's like, I'm not disputing that tariffs obviously aren't part of this or that they aren't interconnected, but just think that Japan wasn't some of the reason for the sell-off, to me, doesn't make much sense. Whenever the yen strengthens against the dollar, you see weakness in equities typically. Whenever the yen weakens against the dollar, you see strength in equities. I mean, that pattern hasn't broken. So how much of this is really Trump versus just leverage, and the source of that being problematic? So to kind of wrap all that up, I think the broader point is we don't know if we're really out of this yet. Typically, bear markets do have very vicious rallies, which is why I keep saying bear markets make fools of bulls and bears. It's why you don't want to short a bear market. But we'll see. The valuation dynamic hasn't been resolved for U.S. stocks.
So when you were thinking about if this is a bear market rally, do you see new lows? And I know you asked your followers on X about what they think if the lows of the April lows are in. Would you see, or what would your gut tell you, that you're seeing new lows or a return back toward that? I think it was April 7th low.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you obviously only know with hindsight. I think it's possibly new lows. I've said before, though, that if the lows are in, I think small caps will rip, higher, which maybe you're starting to see some signs of, but not fully. I think the real answer to that question, though, is ultimately depend upon if Trump is smart. And the question of whether Trump is smart is a function of one's political viewpoint, obviously, certainly in the U.S. If Trump is smart, he should pivot the narrative from tariffs, and he should do so quickly. And if he's smart and he does that and pivots the narrative from tariffs to either tax cuts and or deregulation, then maybe that becomes enough of a reason for equities to push to higher highs, and that was the low. So it's not clear. I think a lot of this is going to be dependent somewhat upon whatever story Trump gets out into the media, into the business media side of things, just to take the distraction, just to make a distraction off of the tariff dynamic, which I think it's going to take a lot longer than people realize. The UK deal is a joke. I mean, first of all, we had a surplus with it to begin with. I think like plans for a deal, nothing was really signed. It's all bluster. And it's like, I mean, if this is the best you can do, good luck with China. Yeah, I think China, if anything, is probably going to mess with Trump.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to ask you about next. The UK deal that the US signed yesterday, not with Wakanda, as you have been hilariously joking on X, but it was kind of limited. It was maybe more symbolic. I wanted to ask you if you think is he just politically posturing, or is this the start of some sort of real trade reset that he thinks he's going to do?
You use an interesting word there, which is symbolic. Because I keep going back to, this guy is not, Trump is a showman, if anything, right? And he, I think, does kind of plan from that standpoint. So he called it Liberation Day. And I wonder if in his mind, he called it Liberation Day because he wants to announce a whole bunch of trade deals on Independence Day, on July 4th, right? Which sounds ridiculous, but Trump. It's so. I do suspect that at least his hope is there's going to be a bunch of, a barrage of positive news that he's going to put out so he can take credit for. And it's, Make America Great Again, July 4th, Liberation Day. And now all these trade deals are taking place. I think it's going to be harder than people realize in terms of that taking place. But yeah, I mean, honestly, I think the whole thing is a joke. I'm not anti-Trump by any means. But I'm definitely not pro-Trump in the way that he's going about certain dynamics. And I think people forget that you can be supportive of your president and still critique their policies and the way they go about things. So again, I think deregulation becomes sort of his card to try to push equities higher. But I got to tell you, it's like I get nervous when I see Trump outright saying to buy stocks. It's like the last time Trump said anything about stocks, yes, it was the day before the low, sure, but prior to that, it was you basically rang the bell of the New York Stock Exchange at one of the tops. So it's like, so I even joked about that on X. Are we gonna enter a phase now where if the stock market goes down, you can sue Trump because he gave financial advice? I mean, this is like the kind of weird world that we're in. I certainly hope that's not the case.
Yeah, and it is very strange. I know that there was some talk I saw on X lately. There was like a joke going around that Portnoy was going to be in some sort of trouble for insider trading, and many of the comments were like, "I don't think that happens under Trump because that it wouldn't make sense. That everyone needs to be treated equal like that." But I wanted to turn now to gold, and you've been saying, to quote you, that gold is fucked. They're strong words.
Is that what I'm saying?
That was the word. That's what I read. What makes you say that? And is this short-term view, or are you flipping long-term bearish on gold and other commodities?
No. Okay. So let's set the record straight. First of all, I use terminology like that because the algorithm likes it. So don't blame me for the algorithm. At the end of the day, you can call me an engagement farmer, but the reality is you're trying to get impressions. You do what it takes. And I'm running businesses, trying to get attention around my content, and then by extension, obviously, my various business lines. So, and I'm definitely not an anti-gold guy by any means. I mean, I was screaming bullish gold October 2023. It was only about 2 months ago, admittedly before this aggressive spike, when I started saying I think there's a risk here that gold is shifting from a flight to safety asset to a speculative momentum one. And by the way, that's verified by the magazine cover indicators. I think it was Barron's or Forbes a couple of weeks ago had gold on the front page. I think gold is next, and the thesis is really that you're going to have margin calls. Then gold, because it's one of the few winners, will become a source of liquidity as people meet their margin calls by selling their winners, not their losers. That's called the disposition effect. That's a very well-known behavioral finance dynamic. And that gold would sell off with a lag, which you haven't seen because you don't really have margin calls because it got short-circuited, obviously, by the move off of that April low. But I still think there's a risk that gold does correct, probably meaningfully, 10, 15, 20% maybe. I don't think it's the end of the bull market in gold by any means. I've gone on record saying that. I say that because I think it's more likely than not that equities are maybe in a lost decade. And I know that sounds dramatic, but look at the Russell 2000. You're halfway through a lost decade. I mean, I'm always blown away by people that think I'm a perma bear and that I'm just like some guy that's anti-stocks. if you just look at the pure number of stocks in the U.S. market, not market cap weighted, just the number of stocks, which include many more small cap names, by definition, there are many more stocks that are back at 2021 levels than not. Because the Russell 2000 is there as an average, right? We're not market cap weighted the way the S&P is. So it's like, perma bear or not, I mean, the reality is it hasn't been a healthy market for a while unless you've been in just passive indices, which you can say most people only care about that. But yeah, I do believe that that does matter. Now, if that does matter, going back to gold, if you're going to be in somewhat of a lost decade type of dynamic, then gold should keep on getting flows, because if you're in a difficult environment for equities, institutional players want lower correlation while being long only. There aren't that many options. Gold is one of them.
Right. And we've talked about, or we've sort of touched on how different policies, especially Trump's policies, are shaping or working with the market. Because the next thing that I want to ask about is how much manipulation is there?
Yeah.
I know you said that this is manipulation on a scale that we've never seen before. As a fund manager, how much do you have to think about how much manipulation plays in to the other forces that are moving the market?
It's funny because like people will say, well, those who don't know how to trade will say it's based on manipulation. Are you kidding me? Like, you have the president's most important person in the world telling you to buy stocks. He's playing off of words that algos are then using to go along with. Like, of course it's manipulated. But like, the Federal Reserve manipulates everything too. They were designed to. The whole purpose of the Federal Reserve Act in 1913 was to manipulate financial markets to not have another banking crisis in 1907. It's not a market that is free from that perspective. Of course there's manipulation. It's just now it's much more out in the open, which is absolutely wild to me that this is taking place. It's like, what, you're telling me that people inside the Trump administration didn't know that he was going to say that on Tuesday into Wednesday, which was that low? You don't think anybody bought into that? It's like, of course this is manipulation. So it's extreme, and I find it sad, unfortunately, that people aren't more outraged by it. But I'm not surprised, just because of the way society has become, I think less attentive, less intelligent. Reading comprehension level is as low as they are, that we talk about, right? So when you're in a market where it's driven by words and not reality, you should really question how much time you want to analyze anything.
Yeah. I know you've been saying small caps are going to show us what's going to happen. And our audience here at CEO.ca would love for that to happen. Personally, I'm so excited to see where you go and what you announce next. And I'm going to be following you on your journey. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Wakanda forever.